Episode 62, Chapter 58. Chapter 58. Link gazed out towards Hyrule Castle, shadowy in the setting sun, feeling the nervous energy that accompanies a coming battle. He didn't know what would happen the following day. Pura said that she had cracked the Guardian's code, whatever that meant, and she had been able to gain control over a select few of them. She had been having problems with the Guardians near here, though. Link worried that they were too far under Ganon's control. Then there were the monsters. Whatever danger the Guardians had once posed to the monsters had apparently been resolved, and the two forces had united against Link's Hyrulean force. Their numbers were not as lopsided as those at Hoteno village, and the Hyruleans had the benefit of the divine beasts, which were able to put their defensive systems to excellent use in the skirmishes that had already happened. Naboris, in particular, sent bokoblins and moblins scurrying. But it all added up to a worrying level of opposition for Link's large, yet still mostly untried force. They had fought well in Hoteno village, but that represented, perhaps, a quarter of the total number that gathered on the field now. Robbie had started outfitting those he could with the special Guardian-resistant armor and ancient weaponry. Swords and spears containing blades made from blue energy, arrows that would destroy the Guardians with a single, well-placed strike, and armor that, supposedly, could withstand a blast from a Guardian's energy beam. He had offered them to Link as well, but he refused. Link's ultimate goal was not to fight Guardians, after all, but to enter the castle for the second time since waking and make his way towards the central spire, towards the sanctum. Where he knew Ganon waited, thanks to Zelda's own words and the Master Sword's quiet, but insistent pull. The rest of the battle was really just a means to get him into the castle.
"Are you ready for this, little guy?"
Daruk asked, standing beside Link. They were together on the back of Rudania, which, among the divine beasts, offered the easiest vantage if one didn't want to be flying high above in the air. Link looked at him, meeting Daruk's warm expression.
"I have no idea."
Urbosa chuckled, and he felt her ghostly hand rest on his shoulder.
"Oh, I have an idea."
"That's right," Mipha said, stepping up beside her and smiling warmly.
"I know that you will defeat Ganon tomorrow." "Oh, yeah,"
Daruk said, pounding his chest silently.
"You've got this. That Ganon isn't going to stand a chance once you get in there."
There was a pause, and Link glanced over at Rivali, who raised one feathered eyebrow.
"Were you waiting for me to say something nice and encouraging, too?"
Link couldn't help himself but to smile.
"Well, not to leave you out."
The Rito crossed his arms.
"Don't die. Again."
Urbosa snorted.
100 years, and you still haven't changed. Would it kill you to say even one nice thing?"
Link laughed, and so did Daruk. Mipha looked a little bit shocked, but then hid a smile behind her hand. Even Rivali chuckled, inclining his head. It felt almost normal. If Link closed his eyes, he could imagine them all sitting around the fire, speaking together, joking, laughing, eating. Zelda would have been there, too. But as he looked at them, all he saw were their spectral forms. Their translucence, the way their feet didn't touch the floor, or how Urbosa's hand, even when upon his shoulder, didn't feel entirely real. Link's smile faded.
"Now, what's that look for?"
Daruk asked, frowning and leaning closer to Link.
"Something you ate."
He shook his head, exhaling slowly.
I can remember coming here 100 years ago. Ganon made sure to let us see the destruction, to see how we had already failed, to see all of you. And then it sprung his trap."
Urbosa hummed softly.
"It's incredible that you both survived that first encounter. You did well, considering what you were up against. It was all we could do to run. There was no way to fight back. And that was the right thing to do. There is no shame in retreating when a battle cannot be won. If you had fought there, then you both would have died, and Ganon would be free." "You mustn't blame yourself, Link,"
Mipha said, stepping up beside him and laying a gentle hand on his arm.
"I am confident that there is nothing more than you, either of you, could have done to change things."
Link nodded.
"I know. I've accepted that, it feels recent. Fresh. I can still remember the panic, the hopelessness." "That's good,"
Urbosa said.
"Use that. Ganon took everything away from us, and now it is time to make it pay."
Link glanced up at Urbosa, giving her an appreciative look.
"You're right. You.
He stopped, no longer looking at Urbosa, but through her. At the woman standing just beyond.
Hello, everyone,
Zelda said. Urbosa whirled, and Link moved to the side so that he no longer had to look through her to see Zelda. She was there, slightly translucent herself, but shining with a soft golden light, rather than the green aura that the champions gave off.
Zelda,
Link began, glancing between her and the castle.
You're here. How are you? I thought. I'm only here in part,
she said, glancing towards the castle.
You are close enough that I felt comfortable enough to appear to you like this for a short time. And I wished to see you all.
Link opened his mouth to say something else, but Urbosa took a step forward, reaching out a hand to place it on Zelda's shoulder. Link saw their forms fuzz slightly where they touched, and her hand sunk slightly into Zelda's shoulder before Urbosa stopped it. Zelda looked up at her, smiling sadly.
I'm sorry, Urbosa. I would hug you, if I could.
Urbosa leaned down and gently kissed the top of Zelda's head, regardless of whether either of them could feel it.
I am so proud of you, little bird.
She spoke softly, and Link had to strain to hear her. But suddenly, he wished that he couldn't. They deserved to have some space. He, at least, had a chance to speak with Zelda recently. Urbosa hadn't seen her in 100 years. The other champions appeared to agree, and they moved away to give the two women some space. Link went with them, standing in silence and looking towards the castle. Behind them, he could hear the hushed tones of Zelda and Urbosa as they spoke but couldn't make out the words. Eventually, the voices of the two women increased in volume again, and Link glanced over to see Urbosa stand up straight again. She gave him a subtle nod to indicate they could approach. Unable to stop himself, Link hurried to Zelda's side, not masking his concern.
Zelda, are you all right? I've been trying to speak with you.
Seeing her like this, incorporeal, terrified him. Was she?
I'm all right, Link,
she said, though her voice sounded weary.
I am alive, though Ganon did its best to destroy me during the battle in Hateno village.
Relief flooded into him, and a lump formed in his throat. She still lived. The nameless fear that had plagued him for the last 2 weeks lifted away, as if made of mist.
What?
He cleared his throat.
What happened? It's difficult to explain, and I fear I don't have much time. My powers are still weakened by my ordeal. But I overcommitted myself to helping you in that battle, and Ganon used that chance to attack me with my guard down. It very nearly destroyed me and my power.
Rage. White, hot rage. Link's knuckles popped as his hands clenched into tight fists. He felt angry enough to charge the castle now the plan be damned. He wanted to cut that creature to pieces.
But you've still got him plugged up now, princess?
Daruk asked. Zelda nodded.
My power endured, even though I was not. Well, suffice it to say, Ganon still appears to be trapped. Appears to be?
Rivali asked.
Yes. It did something while I was in my weakened state that made it impossible for me to observe it anymore. It may have the strength to break free now but is merely biding its time. It's a good thing we're ready for him this time, then,
Daruk said, grinning and slamming his fist into his palm.
Let him break out, I say. I'll show him the proper might of Rudania.
No, Link thought. Not yet. He wanted to be there when Ganon appeared. Attack before the creature could gain the upper hand. Zelda looked back at the castle, frowning.
You all must be careful tomorrow. I do not think it will try to take over the divine beasts again. Each blight that it sent out was a piece of its own soul. Each one weakened it a small amount, and I doubt it will risk doing so again now. However, it could.
Rivali scoffed.
What could it do to us, even if it did? We're already dead.
Zelda looked at him and shook her head.
I don't know. It might, perhaps, be able to retake the divine beasts. But that isn't my greatest concern.
She looked at Link.
I don't believe its intent is to attack the divine beasts, but to find a way to defeat you. It will do everything it can to stop you from reaching the sanctum. I'm sure of it.
Link gave her a confident smile, the rage he felt earlier having cooled.
For what it's worth, I've been trying to figure out ways to defeat impossible monsters since I woke up. It's nice to have something trying to figure out ways to defeat me for once. Yes, well,
she said, smiling and inclining her head.
Perhaps more of a plan this time than just charging the castle. The Guardians will be seeking you out.
When he said nothing, she frowned.
You do have more of a plan than to just charge the castle, right? Well, I've been so focused on trying to figure out ways to defeat Ganon, you see,
she groaned in such a positively Zelda way that he couldn't help but to grin.
I can do this, Zel.
She stiffened.
We have a plan. The Guardians shouldn't be an issue.
Zelda's eyes widened.
They did it? They were able to retake control.
Link nodded.
Pura is still working on a few issues with the ones here, but they took complete control over some.
She remained silent for a time, appearing to consider these implications. Link understood why, too. If Ganon lost its guardians, then the battle would quickly turn in their favor. Ganon's defeat could ultimately end up looking a lot like the one depicted in Impa's old mural. He still worried, however.
But how am I supposed to hurt Ganon? Each time I've seen it, it's been just flying smoke. Will I even be able to touch it?
Her eyes focused on him again, and her expression grew grim.
I wish that all you would have to face would be its incorporeal form. That form is weak. But...
she sighed.
When it arose 100 years ago, there is a reason that it used the Guardians instead of attacking directly. Ganon has no body. Or, at least, it didn't. When I arrived, I interrupted its attempts to create a new one, and my seal kept it from doing so for the last 100 years. But now that it succeeded in pushing me away...
Link felt the last puzzle piece falling into place. The only time he had ever seen Ganon was in that strange, smoking boar-like form. It was comforting, in a way, to know that the Ganon he fought tomorrow would be something physical. Even if he didn't know what to expect.
Good. I can fight that. It will be strong, Link. This won't be as simple as your fights against the Blights.
Simple? Link smiled wryly.
I can handle it.
He reached back and touched the Master Sword's hilt.
We can.
She looked at him quietly for a time before nodding.
I know you can. And what about us, Princess?
Daruk asked.
Be ready to strike when I say. Link, you'll need to draw Ganon out into the open. You won't want to fight it in the sanctum, anyway, if you can avoid it. It's a mess in there. Bring it to where the Guardians can have a clear shot and be prepared to get out of the way. And if Ganon won't take the bait?
Rivali asked.
Then fire on the sanctum itself. I believe that I can protect Link from harm if it comes to that.
Urbosa nodded.
And once we hit it, Ganon should be weakened enough for you. Yes. That's when I will strike.
Zelda's expression hardened, and Link saw some of the hatred she bore for the creature in her eyes. He could only imagine what she had gone through for the last 100 years. It made his trials seem paltry by comparison.
So, what did it?
Rivali asked after a short pause.
How did you finally get your power?
Her expression shifted to uncertainty.
I always thought that the power would come through sacrifice and denying myself comforts to make myself more holy. I felt that by emptying myself, I would be able to be filled, somehow.
Mipha gasped softly, moving forward to catch Zelda's eyes.
But that wasn't it, was it? You had it all along.
Zelda glanced up at her and gave Mipha a sad smile.
Yes, in a way. Perhaps traveling to the springs was useful during the last spring, I did see something.
Her eyes darted towards Link, but then quickly away again.
That still doesn't answer it,
Rivali said, crossing his wings and frowning.
What actually did it?
Zelda met the Rito's eyes.
I had to accept some things about myself. I had to stop denying myself who I am. I am the physical embodiment of Hylia, not whoever I was trying to become. That's it. The secret was that you had to be yourself. There were other aspects of it, as well. Hylia believes in preserving all life, in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She values courage, sacrifice, and love. In those days, I had so much fear and doubt, made only worse by the feeling that I wasn't.
She hesitated, looking away.
Good enough. Ah, Princess.
Daruk said.
We all could have told you how wrong you were there.
Urbosa nodded, looking down at Zelda fondly.
You were always the worthiest of us. Thank you.
Zelda smiled at each of them, but then her voice grew distant.
There is something else, too. Something that none of our scholars knew. The power I hold, it isn't just the goddess. It's something else. Something lost to time. It requires a certain balance of character that I, well, so worried and afraid, I lacked. So? How did it happen, then?
Rivali's tone had grown quieter, and he seemed genuinely curious.
If you were afraid before, how did you?
Zelda didn't immediately answer, so Link did, instead.
She stood between me and a guardian.
She looked around at him sharply, surprise written across her features. He met her eyes and nodded.
I was dying. She stepped in front of me as a guardian prepared to finish me off. And then it just happened. Courage, sacrifice, and love,
Mipha said. Zelda's eyes remained on his.
Yes.
A moment of stillness passed between them. But it was broken as her face grew pinched. When she spoke, her voice was strained.
I'm sorry, I must go. Ganon is.
She faded from view.
Zelda.
Link asked, stepping forward and looking around.
Zelda, are you all right? Yes.
Her voice was fainter now and came from the direction of the castle.
Ganon must have noticed what I was doing. I am still holding it at bay, but be prepared, Link.
Link reached back and grasped the Master Sword's hilt.
I'm coming now. No.
She said, sharply. And then, less severely,
no. Don't attack until everything is ready. I can withstand this. It didn't catch me off guard like last time.
Link wanted to ignore her warning. He wanted to charge the castle like last time, race up to the sanctum, and end Ganon right then and there. But a hand on his shoulder stopped him. He glanced back and saw Urbosa standing just behind him, looking up towards the castle.
You let us know if you need us, little bird. We'll be ready. If not, then we will see you tomorrow. I look forward to it.
One by one, the spirits of the champions disappeared, each returning to their own divine beast. Mipha would spend the precious time remaining with Sidon. Her father had not been able to come down for the battle. He stayed behind to prepare his people for what would come, should they fail. Urbosa wished to spend time with Riju, to impart what wisdom she could on the young ruler. Rivali went back to Meadow, but Link didn't know if Tiba would join him or not. For some reason, that bothered Link. Someone should be prepared to say goodbye to Rivali. Maybe Link would ask one of the Rito to fly him up there for a time. Daruk did not disappear. After all, they were still upon his final resting place. Instead, he just looked out at the Gorons around them, smiling in a somber way.
I tell ya, brother. It's good to finally be here.
Link pushed his worries about Rivali away and stepped up beside him.
It is.
Daruk looked down at him, eyes twinkling.
I always knew you had it in you. You probably won't even need our help tomorrow. You're going to march right up there and make that Ganon wish he never showed his ugly face. I hope so, Daruk. I've got to admit that now that we're here, He smiled faintly. I'm pretty damn terrified. Well, sure you are. Why wouldn't you be? It's just like with that grandson of mine. He gets pretty nervous around monsters, you know. But he still bouldered up and did what he had to do to keep people safe. Yeah, it's not.
It was hard to put into words the dread Link felt. It wasn't fear for himself. He didn't fear death. But he greatly feared what his death would bring.
I just can't fail again. The last time I was here, Ganon seemed so strong, Daruk. And everything I faced up until now, Zelda called them pieces of it. Small pieces of its power. Yeah. But you beat those. With help and more than a bit of luck.
Link sighed, shaking his head.
I just don't want to be responsible for the deaths of everyone I brought with me, Daruk. And those that remain elsewhere.
Daruk reached up, stroking his beard thoughtfully.
Look, brother. You want to know my opinion? Ganon doesn't stand a chance tomorrow. You're way stronger now than you were 100 years ago. Besides, you aren't facing him alone. We're all here, ready to back you up. And you're going to have a fully powered princess by your side, too. We've got everything we need to take him out.
Link remained quiet for a long time, but then nodded.
Yeah. You're right.
He looked up at his friend and brother.
You know, I'm going to miss you. You always knew me better than I knew myself.
The Goron reached out and placed a translucent hand on his shoulder, which he could just barely feel.
You grew up strong, Link. You'll be all right. You and the princess? I know you'll both be just fine.
Link smiled, feeling a painful lump form in his throat. Saying goodbye was never easy. But before he could say anything else, a sound from the ramp leading up onto Rudania's top deck alerted them to another presence. He looked around to see Unibo peeking his head up.
Is everyone gone now? I didn't want to interrupt you guys.
Link nodded and reached up to wipe his eyes.
Yeah, they've all gone back to their divine beasts. Oh, okay.
Unibo walked up to them, but then hesitated, looking between the two of them.
Should I still wait? If you want to keep talking.
Link shook his head quickly.
No, you're okay. Come on.
He stepped to the side to allow Unibo to walk up and stand between him and Daruk. The larger Goron grinned down at his grandson.
So, what have they got you doing tomorrow, big guy? They asked me to stay back and keep the leaders safe. Said that hopefully I wouldn't be needed, but in case anything attacked them, they wanted me around to protect them until reinforcements arrive.
Daruk nodded.
That's good. Big battle tomorrow. It'd be bad if the guys running it were taken out in the middle of it.
Link looked between Unibo and Daruk as they spoke, smiling faintly. He was truly glad to have been able to bring these two together. He wasn't sure what it must have been like for Daruk, not knowing whatever happened to his son all those years ago, though he supposed it might be similar to how he felt about his family. He would never know for absolute certainty what happened to his sister and father. Even if they had survived, they would, of course, be dead now. Even the healthiest Hylians didn't live nearly as long as Sheikah. But it was nice to imagine that Errol had a child or even a grandchild out there with that same adventurous spirit, commanding from the deck of a ship. He didn't believe it to be true. But his father had been a strong knight in his own regard. If anyone could have gotten them out of that hellscape, it would have been him. Link supposed that was the best he could ever hope for.
Linky. Hey, Linky, wake up.
Something shook him violently, and Link started, sitting up quickly and reaching for the Master Sword. A shadowy figure knelt just inside his small lean-to, silhouetted by a small lamp just behind her.
Pura.
Link frowned, looking beyond her. It was still dark outside.
What happened? Has there been an attack? No, but I need your help. I know why I can't get through to the Guardians here.
Link looked past her. The sky was still dark outside, and he could see stars. She had probably been up through the night working on this.
What do you need? The tower here on Hyrule Field, we need to activate it. At least, that's my theory. The other places I tried all had active towers, and I was able to control the Guardians there.
Link nodded and reached over, grabbing his champion's tunic. He slipped it on over his head.
I'll go right away then. I'm coming with you.
Link pursed his lips, staring at her.
You can just teleport to it when I'm finished, though. This will be faster. And, besides, I've never seen one get activated before.
He eyed her for a moment, not sure how he felt about that. He worried that there might be monsters in the direction of the tower, but he should be able to protect her, as long as they were careful.
All right. You've got a horse ready. And I already had yours saddled.
Link nodded and then shooed her back, out of his little tent. He threw the blanket off of himself and pulled his trousers on before stepping out and looking around. It was still night, yes, but it would be morning soon. They needed to move quickly. He spotted Pura standing nearby with 3 horses. 3. And then he saw Paya sitting atop one of them, dressed in the tight-fitting Sheikah warrior's garb. Link stepped forward, taking Spirit's reins. He looked up at her.
You're going to?
Paya nodded. Her veil was down, so he could see her face.
Aunt Pura wants me there, in case anything tries to attack her while she works or on the way back. Oh, don't give me that look,
Pura said a moment later.
Paya can handle protecting me just fine. We'll be at the top of the tower, anyway. This is just a precaution.
Link finally sighed.
I know.
He glanced towards Paya.
Just be careful. I don't think Ganon knows our plan yet, and I don't know what it'll do when it realizes.
The Sheikah woman looked nervous but nodded.
I will.
Link mounted up onto Spirit's back and, together, they set off west, towards the tower. It didn't take long, less than an hour, though they had to push their horses more than Link normally would have advised. The Sheikah Tower in Hyrule Field had once, apparently, been at the center of an old town. From the large amount of cracked rock and dirt around its base, Link assumed that it had been buried just like the one upon the Great Plateau. Unfortunately, unlike the tower on the plateau, this one didn't just have a couple of bokoblins milling about.
Pura, those are guardians.
Link glared at the smaller women.
Why are there guardians here?
Pura looked almost as alarmed as Link felt. They had left their horses behind in a grove of trees about a half-mile prior, choosing to approach the tower on foot, in case there were enemies watching. It was a good thing, too, as 3 guardians picked their way through the old town ruins.
How should I know? Snap, I didn't expect them to be here.
Link cursed softly and peered back out from around the wall they hid behind. He felt the anxiety, the fear, the near panic. He had hoped that regaining all of his memories would have wiped that away, but no, it was still there. He just couldn't let it cause him to freeze.
Maybe Ganon figured out our plan and sent them to block us,
Paya said, looking worried. Pura glanced out and shook her head.
No, I don't think so. They're wandering, not searching. They've probably been here for 100 years. Maybe they were the ones who destroyed this town and then stayed here when Zelda suppressed Ganon. Great.
He sighed, closing his eyes and steeling his nerves. He had a feeling that Zelda would call this reckless.
Okay, I'm going to take them out.
Pura raised one thin eyebrow.
You're going to take them out? All 3 of them? Link, don't you think that is a little bit dangerous?
Paya asked. I've destroyed a lot more than 3 of these. That was one thing that having his memories back did help him with. He knew their weaknesses, and he knew how he had done it in the past.
I'll be alright. You just try to stay out of sight, alright? Maybe we should go back and get more help.
Paya fingered the hilt of her sword, as if wondering if she could assist in some way. Link shook his head and reached back, pulling the Master Sword free. It shone in the darkness, reacting to Ganon's corruption within the Guardians themselves, he imagined. Or perhaps it was just Ganon's proximity.
No time. But I'll be fine.
And before either of them could object further, he moved to the edge of the wall and waited for one of the Guardians to patrol closer. Here we go, he thought, taking a few steadying breaths. It came closer, its long legs picking their way over rubble. Its eye turned this way and that, and Link could hear it whirring softly. It turned away. Link sprang from his hiding spot and raced towards it, wielding his sword in his left hand and shield in his right. It didn't even see him approaching. He swept the shining sword out, cutting through its leg like paper. Sparks flew from the severed limb, and the Guardian lurched. It swept its head around, trying to find the attacker, but Link kept moving, staying just out of its line of sight. He cut through 2 more of the legs before it, finally, toppled. Yes. He ran up onto its round body and rammed the Master Sword into the pulsing eye. The lights on its body began to flash, and Link jumped off, backing away from it. When it exploded, he looked at the Guardian's remains with wide eyes, breaths coming in rapidly. He had done it. He had actually done it. The other 2 patrolling Guardians came into view, only visible in the darkness by their pattern of red lights and the single blue of their eye. They saw him immediately, and he swore, ducking behind a wall as they fired. The wall exploded, and Link was thrown backwards. He rolled back to his feet, momentarily dazed by the blow, but he saw them scrabbling across the rubble and the fallen Guardian, racing towards their quarry. Gritting his teeth, he broke into a run straight for them. One of them fired, but Link saw its eye flash white right before doing so. He dodged the line of fire and then ducked as the second one did the same thing. He felt its heat as the lance of white energy passed overhead. Before they could fire again, Link ran around one of them, placing it between him and the other guardian. He swept his sword towards its leg, but it danced just out of reach. He got his shield up just in time to deflect another blast by the guardian. It bounced off and struck the base of the tower harmlessly. The other guardian moved into view, and Link ran in the opposite direction, trying to keep the first guardian between them. He attempted attacking its legs again, but this time, it swept out, striking him in the chest with its claws and sending him flying. He hit the ground with a roll and the earth next to him exploded with fire. Grunting, he was flung further away until he finally came to a stop some distance away. He heard the metal feet tearing across the ground towards him and threw himself back to his feet. He got his shield up just in time to deflect the next blast, though it pushed him back several inches. He raised his sword into the air, and it blazed with increased power and light. With a downward sweep, he sent an arc of white light forward that splashed across the guardian's head. It didn't destroy it, but it did noticeably shake it. Its lights flickered rapidly, and it shuffled to the side. The other guardian fired, but this time, Link parried the energy blast right back towards it. It struck true, and that one began to flash with overloaded energy. A moment later, it exploded and sent its stunned partner careening, 3 of its legs flailing as it struggled to keep from falling over completely. He ran forward just as it brought its legs back down, righting itself. As it turned its eye towards him, Link kicked his feet out and twisted, coming down on his right side, arm underneath him. He slid across the ground on his shield, coming to a stop just beneath the bright, shining spot on the guardian's underside. Smiling, he rammed the master sword up into it, and then he quickly raced away as it exploded. When it was gone, he stopped, looking around for any other movement. Any other red lights or blue eyes. But there was nothing. All 3 of the guardians had been destroyed. None remained.
Wow,
Pura said, stepping out from behind the wall.
Click, snap, I knew you knew how to fight them, but... Wow.
Link slid the master sword into its scabbard and wiped his sleeve across his forehead. His hand shook slightly. I did it. I can do this. He formed a fist to steady his hand and lowered it.
Are you all right?
Paya asked, drawing his attention. Had she seen?
I saw that guardian hit you. Oh.
Link felt his chest, where he had been struck by the clawed foot. It would leave a bruise, assuming Mipha's healing power didn't make it fade before it could even do that.
I'm all right. That wasn't bad. You know, Robbie used to be pretty good at fighting these things,
Pura said, inspecting some of the guardian remains.
Probably even better than you.
She scrunched up her face at a charred leg.
At least he could take them out without blowing them to pieces.
Link snorted.
Well, next time, you can ask him to accompany you to the tower. Nah, he's too old now. I wonder if that son of his picked up any of his old tricks, though. Oh, Grante.
Paya said, stiffening slightly. A sly smile appeared on Pura's face, and she looked over at Paya, eyes twinkling.
Know him, do you?
Paya quickly looked away.
We've met. He came to Kakariko village shortly after he left home. And?
Pura snapped her fingers.
What did you think about him?
Paya looked anxiously around, finally glancing up at the tower.
Why don't we activate the tower now? We don't have a lot of time, right?
Pura cackled in a way that made Link think of her sister and stepped forward to join him at the base of the tower. He gave Paya a smile, which only seemed to embarrass her further. Finally, he began to climb the tower. He reached the top first and then helped both of the women up onto the top. Once they both made it up, he exhaled slowly and glanced around. The tower offered a great view of Hyrule Field, though it also showed much of the destruction around them. He could see the broken remains of the old Hyrule garrison and the exchange to the south. He could now remember the faces of people that he had known in both of those places. Setting his jaw, he turned back and went to the pedestal, setting his Sheikah slate down into the depression. Blue light burst around them as the tower came to life, its 3 arms turning to reach for the heavens.
Sheikah Tower activated. Teleportation point activated. Detecting nearby guardians. Confirmed. 113 nearby guardians detected.
Pura approached and then pulled his slate off the pedestal, shooing him away. Then she connected hers to the pedestal through some kind of long wire and knelt on the ground, beginning to tap away at her Sheikah slate.
Alright, I'm in,
she said a tense minute later. She looked up at Link.
I'll get this ready, but I'm not going to hit it until the attack is supposed to begin. I don't want Ganon to try to fight back until it's too late.
Link watched her for a moment and then turned away, going back to the edge of the tower and looking out towards Hyrule Castle. The sky had begun to lighten. It would be time soon. His pulse quickened with anticipation. This is it. Paya stepped up beside him, following his gaze.
Are you ready?
He glanced towards her.
I'm as ready as I can be.
She bit her lip, looking at him. He saw worry in her expression and thought back to how she had reacted when he returned from the great forest.
I wanted to thank you. For everything you've done for us. For helping me save grandmother. For helping me do this.
She motioned down at herself, looking more like a warrior than the quiet girl who he so often saw cleaning. Link smiled warmly.
It's nothing. I'm glad I was able to be there to help, but this was all a part of you already. You just needed a reason to bring it out. Maybe, but I don't think I could have if you weren't there.
Link shook his head.
It's easy to think that now, but I think you would have. People often do the most amazing things when they're backed up against a wall.
Memories of Zelda standing before him, facing down a deadly guardian, flashed through his mind. Paya remained silent for a time, and then she smiled.
I know that you'll win today. Yeah,
Link said, eyes remaining on the castle.
I don't plan to lose.
He looked at her and smiled.
Stay safe. I'll see you again soon.
He removed the paraglider from its pouch and opened it. She looked alarmed, and Link grinned. She had never seen him with it, now that he thought about it. He stepped off the tower's edge, gliding around it in a lazy circle until finally coming to rest on the ground below. He glanced up towards the tower and waved before turning and running towards the trees where they had left the horses. Link sat on Spirit's back at the head of the army. Spread out to either side of him was an army made up of all of Hyrule's races. Zora, their weapons gleaming silver in the morning sun, Gorons, wearing sheets of metal for armor and wielding massive hammers and other mining tools, Rito, flying overhead with bows and explosives, Gerudo, with golden armor and deadly blades, Sheikah, looking not so different than the warriors that he remembered from the past in their knee-length robes, and Hylians, some with weapons and armor, but many with farming tools and leather jerkins. Nearest Link, about 30 of the Sheikah had been outfitted in Robbie's special ancient armor, with its conical helmet that covered most of their face and the heavy black plating with the same ancient designs that were visible on the Guardians. Others joined them, Zora and Gerudo, that wielded shining blue energy weapons. Overhead, Link knew that many of the Rito had been armed with ancient arrows. He truly hoped that none of them would be needed. If Pure Aw's gambit worked. Overhead, Meadow gave a bone-trembling screech, and Link drew the Master Sword. The blade still shone. Even the spirit of the sword felt the anticipation. The ground rumbled, a sign of Ganon's growing anger. Across the field from them, Link saw monsters and guardians. Even from this distance, he could see glowing red eyes on the monsters' faces. They, like the guardians, were being controlled by Ganon's influence. Thunder cracked as a bolt of lightning shot out from Naboris into the sky, the bolt splitting apart and spreading like the branches of a tree. Link waited. Spirit pawed the ground. He heard some of the armored figures around him, many on horses of their own, shifting nervously. And ahead of them, the red lights on the dozens of guardians began to flicker. Link held his breath. The lights flickered more, and the guardians shivered. The lights turned orange. Then red. Then orange. Red. Orange. Blue. The guardians began to fire into the force of monsters, and chaos began among Ganon's ranks immediately. Monsters tried fighting back, but the guardians were impervious to their unsophisticated weapons. Bokoblins and moblins burned as the guardians began to hunt their new quarry. Link thrust the Master Sword into the air. Behind him, the army from every corner of Hyrule bellowed a roar that drowned out even Ganon's fury. I'm coming, Zelda. And then with a battle cry, Link kicked Spirit into motion and began racing across the field. Toward Hyrule Castle. The mounted fighters struck the monsters first, slamming into their confused ranks like a sledgehammer. Link weaved through the confused creatures, striking with the Master Sword like a viper's tongue. He didn't care to do a lot of damage. His goal was not to get bogged down in the fighting here. He needed to get to Castle Town. He needed to get to the castle. He rode past a guardian with shining blue lights, which sent a blast of white energy straight into a confused group of Lizalfoes. The survivors scattered, and the guardian gave chase. Seeing it sent a shiver down Link's spine, but he had to ignore that for now. He had faced that fear and been victorious. It wouldn't stop him now. He heard the guttural yelling, and he wheeled Spirit just in time to block the blow by a pale-skinned bokoblin wielding a surprisingly well-cared for sword. Link immediately recognized the blade as one of the royal broadswords given to Knights of Hyrule. He had never been given one, however the Master's sword served as proof enough of his standing. The bokoblin, mounted on a horse of its own, screeched and aimed a strike at Spirit's flank. Link caught the blade again and rotated his wrist, easily breaking the bokoblin's grip. A quick slice sent the bokoblin sliding off its horse to the side. A guardian skywatcher, one of the flying ones, hovered overhead. Link saw some monsters fire arrows ineffectually at it before it fired down at them. It's working. He kicked Spirit into another gallop, leaping over the body of a fallen moblin, and sped towards the city. This is it. He began to see other monsters as he raced through their ranks. Hinoxes, Lynels, Wolfos, and even some strange creatures in robes that danced through the air and flung fire and ice. Part of him worried and wanted to remain, to help the army as it clashed with this force. But no. No. He had to keep going. As he rode past one of the dancing magicians, he slid the Master's sword back into its scabbard and drew an arrow, launching it right into the shadowy face underneath its hood. It fell back to the ground and was almost immediately trampled by numerous smaller Guardian scouts. Satisfied, Link raced on, right through what was once the gates of Castle Town and into the ruined city itself, leaving much of the furious battle behind. Pura's fingers danced across her Sheikah Slate's screen, typing in a series of new instructions to override Ganon's newest attempts at retaking control of his guardians. Who knew the Calamity was so capable of technical genius? It was a struggle, true, but Pura hadn't been studying this technology for over 100 years for nothing. She hadn't planned on staying here, tethered to the tower, but the moment she tried to disconnect from the tower's console, Ganon had reasserted control. So, she remained, engaged in an entirely unique sort of battle. Sweat dripped from her nose onto the screen, and she quickly brushed it away.
How's it looking, Paya? The Guardians are attacking the monsters, still.
Paya watched the battle with the use of a spyglass that Pura brought. She had been the one to tell Pura when she saw the signal, the lightning bolt from Naboris, to begin. And now she was the one who made sure Pura's work was still working. Also, she had managed to fight off some bokoblins that had come for them earlier. That had been a close one, but she clearly knew her stuff. Even if she still blushed like a tomato every time she saw a cute boy. She saw new targeting information flash across her screen as Ganon's corruption, again, fought against her programming.
Click, snap, stop that.
She quickly revised it. Link would have had a rude welcoming if she hadn't caught that.
Aunt Pura.
Pura ignored Paya. Really, she just prattled on too much. She didn't have time to talk about the girl's love life right now. What's this? Ha. Thought you could sneak that past me, did you?
Aunt Pura. What, girl? I'm busy. Are you controlling those guardians?
Pura frowned as she keyed some new instructions into the Sheikah Slate.
Which ones? The ones heading towards the tower.
Pura's head snapped up and she looked around in alarm. Momentarily leaving her Sheikah Slate behind, she hurried to the edge and saw what Paya was looking at. Rapidly racing towards them from the southwest, from just around Mount Daphnes, was a group of about 7 guardians. Each of them glowed with red light.
Snap!
She quickly ran back to her Sheikah Slate, already seeing that Ganon had taken that opportunity to override some of her commands.
Stay down, Paya. Let me know if they're coming towards us.
But she knew they were. Ganon knew exactly where she was and what she was up to, and it had brought reinforcements assigned to towers outside of the region to help. Riding through Castle Town made memories of that day with Zelda flash through his mind. The fear, the panic, the anguish, it was all nearly enough to overwhelm Link, even now. He saw a street that he knew would lead towards his father's old house, his family's presumed resting place. But he continued on, fixing his eyes on the castle. It rose above him so large and intimidating. He could see the sanctum, even from here. The heart of the castle. The throne room. The place he had been knighted. The place he had received his champion's tunic. The place his position as Zelda's knight had been confirmed. The place he would face his destiny. Everything here was covered with malice. It dripped down walls and covered huge swaths of the ground. It formed angry, black spikes that jutted up through rotten remains of old carts and booths. At times, it formed roadblocks, though the master's sword dispelled it easily enough. It slowed his progress, however, much to his dismay. Not only that, but it also distracted him, which very nearly proved fatal as a nearby wall suddenly collapsed out into the street, old bricks flying towards him. Spirit danced to the side, and Link whirled, holding his shield up to block the shower of brick and mortar. He squinted his eyes, looking through the smoke and haze as a guardian rose out of the rubble. Its movements were sluggish, almost drunken, and Link could see its lights flickering between blue, orange, and red. It fired its energy beam off randomly into the air. Link cursed and steered Spirit towards the guardian, drawing the master's sword. As he raced past, he leaned low in the saddle, cutting off 2 of its legs. The guardian lurched, but righted itself. Its head swiveled around to track him, and its lights turned red. Link pulled Spirit to the side just as it fired, obliterating the ruins of another old building. He wheeled Spirit around and raced back in the direction of the guardian. It followed him with its eye, and Link lifted his shield expectantly. Before it could fire, though, its lights began to flash between the different colors again. He cut through 2 more of its legs, sending it crashing to the ground in a heap. Link could have remained behind to finish it off, but he didn't. He kicked Spirit into a sprint, racing through the town and leaving the disabled guardian behind. If Ganon was fighting back, it was all the more important that he get to the castle. His army would be torn apart if they were caught between hostile guardians and monsters. The ground underneath them rumbled, and Link heard a sound like a roar that reverberated out from within the castle. He ducked low and pushed Spirit harder, gritting his teeth as he reached the central square. 2 guardians waited there. One stood upright, while another was already missing half of its legs. The disabled guardian turned its head towards Link and the lights along its body flashed red. Link swerved around what once may have been a merchant's stall, though it was now no more than a pile of rotten wood and old fabric. The guardian fired, but the shot went wild. The other guardian's lights flashed blue, and it turned its head, not towards Link, but towards the other guardian. It fired, sending the other machine careening onto its side. He kept riding past it. Urbosa watched the battle unfolding before her with a satisfied grin. She saw her Gerudo warriors fighting just as they always had, with the combination of grace and fury that all Gerudo were known for. Some rode on horseback, but most fought on foot, moving like dancers as they cut through the ranks of monsters. The current Gerudo chief stood atop Noboru's head right next to her, watching with avid eyes. Urbosa had been surprised when she saw how young Riju was, but immediately recognized the indomitable Gerudo spirit within her. Even in the last 2 weeks, she had already learned much about controlling Noborus. Urbosa had no doubts that she would be held as a wondrous chief as she grew older and matured. She would be the chief that fought back against the calamity.
Look!
Riju said, pointing. Urbosa followed her gaze and watched as a Gerudo warrior grabbed onto a horse's bridle as it rode by, swinging up into the saddle and dislodging its bokoblin rider, and then ran down another pair of monsters. Hey! That's my old move. Urbosa thought, wryly.
Urbosa!
She whirled to see the ghostly form of Rivali standing just behind her.
Rivali! What is it? We've got problems.
He stepped up beside her, ignoring the confused look on Riju's face. He pointed to the east, where Urbosa could just make out a few specks in the air and racing across the ground.
Guardians! And?
Rivali gave her an irritated look, but then a look of understanding flashed over his face.
Of course. You Gerudo don't have Rito eyesight. I always forget.
It was amazing that she had never punched this Rito, considering how many times she had wanted to. She actually wished that she had. Just once. Urbosa had no regrets with how she had lived her life, but... well, there were some things that would have been fun to do.
They're glowing red, Urbosa. Not on our side.
Urbosa swore and Naboris rumbled into motion.
I'll head that way. Let the others know to expect a counterattack and be prepared to support the army.
Riju stumbled as Naboris lurched beneath her feet. Urbosa glanced at her, briefly wondering if she should send the girl down below, but she decided against it almost immediately. It wouldn't do to treat the current Gerudo chief like a child. She had every right to be here with Urbosa.
Riju, I'll control Naboris lightning, but put the thunder helmet on. Use it if some of those flyers come after us. I don't know what kind of damage they might do to Naboris.
Besides, being this close to the lightning could be dangerous. Urbosa directed where it would strike, but she could not control the path the bolts took to get there. Best to be safe. Riju looked at her and hesitated only a moment before nodding, pulling the thunder helm from the bag on her waist and slipping it onto her head. It was still much too large for her, but Urbosa felt pride, all the same. When she met this girl's grandmother and mother in the beyond, she would make sure to tell them of Riju's accomplishments. The tower shook beneath them as Pura frantically typed on her Sheikah slate. Come on, come on, come on. The ground beneath her lurched, and she stumbled, leaning against the pedestal for support. Ganon overrode her code again, damn it.
Aunt Pura, I don't think. Quiet.
Their tower was surrounded. The Guardians did not try to climb it like Pura initially thought they might. Instead, they just surrounded it and began to fire away at its base. The tower held up remarkably well, but she knew how powerful those blasts were. Even something like the tower could not withstand such damage forever. But maybe, her last gambit would work. She just needed time. Just a little bit more time.
Do you see them yet?
She asked, fingers tapping with increasing desperation. Her fingertips were bruised, but she couldn't stop. Even a few seconds could give Ganon the edge it needed to retake complete control. Paya looked around, rising just enough to look beyond the edge of the tower.
No, I wait. I do. They're coming.
Pura's guardians. Not the ones from the castle, the ones that Ganon still fought her so hard for. No, these were the ones that she had first turned. Ganon hadn't even attempted to retake those. It was clear that it was bound by some of the same rules that she was. The Guardians corresponded to certain tower regions, and the tower lurched again, much worse this time. Snap, don't fall. Not now. Not when we're so close.
They're attacking the others. It's working.
She focused on the Sheikah slate, fighting to override Ganon's commands, but she felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding. She couldn't keep this up forever. Already, she felt exhausted. Her brain was fried, yet Ganon continued to fight her at every turn. It was like a machine. Nothing she did could keep it at bay for more than a few seconds now. She heard the Guardians fighting below, destroying each other. She felt more blasts strike the tower, however, and it swayed dangerously. Too much. It was too top-heavy if things continued like this any longer. Pura swore softly. Sorry, Linky. I hope I bought you enough time. One last gambit. One final move. Her fingers began typing out a new command for the Guardians to follow. It wouldn't last long, but she hoped it would be enough to help the army and Link. The gate was right there. Spirit raced across the square and towards the gate. The massive wooden doors remained, but one of them was slightly ajar. Link hoped that he and Spirit could force it open. Suddenly, a Skywatcher bore down on him from the east, its lights glowing a steady red. Link swore and turned his horse down a side street just before he reached the bridge that crossed the moat. The Guardian fired, causing cobblestones to erupt into the air in a plume of fire. Spirit puffed heavily, his fur slick with sweat, as he raced down the street. It had once been lined by buildings that they could have taken cover by, but now most of those buildings were gone, and what remained wouldn't have survived even a single blast.
Come on, boy. Almost there.
Link turned Spirit, leaning low as his hooves momentarily slipped on the stones before finding traction again. The Guardian fired again, nearly catching them. I've got to get this thing off our back. He sheathed the Master Sword and pulled out his bow, taking aim with an ancient arrow. He released it, but the shot went wild. Even the best horseback archer couldn't fire accurately on a galloping horse. Not a moving, flying target. Link cursed and ducked as another blast shot past them. They sped back into the square, where, to Link's horror, the guardian that had helped him before now shone with red lights as well. "Come on, Pura, help me out here." Link raced Spirit around the fountain in a tight circle. He had a very bad idea. He grabbed 2 ancient arrows, placing them between his teeth. As he approached the guardian stalker, Link pulled his feet out of the stirrups, up onto the saddle, and leaped free of Spirit, arcing high in the air towards the fountain. He took a deep breath and slowed everything around him as he focused on the guardian. Link quickly knocked one of the ancient arrows and drew, aiming right for the guardian's eye. His aim, ever true in this state, struck dead center of the eye. The arrow exploded in blue light, and the guardian began to flicker rapidly. Link landed painfully in the fountain, which was empty, save for a coating of malice that, thankfully, parted around him due to the master's sword. He stayed low as the guardian exploded, sending molten chunks in all directions. Then he popped back up and took aim at the Skywatcher. It advanced on him, eye pulsing with vibrant blue energy. And then another Skywatcher, this one coming from the direction of the castle, fired upon the first. Tiba dove through the air, tucking his wings close to his body, eyes on the dancing Wizrobe, causing so many problems for that group of Gorons below. A lance of white energy shot past him. The guardians were acting increasingly erratic. Hopefully that Rito he sent would arrive back with more of those Sheikah arrows soon. He flung his wings out wide, halting his dive and thrusting his bow forward, catching it in his outstretched wing. He took quick aim, shooting an arrow into the Wizrobe's face, which knocked it out of the air. The Gorons literally rolled over it a moment later, ensuring it would not rise again just in case the arrow in its eye didn't do the trick. Another line of white energy shot past, and Tiba cursed, spinning before he dropped too low to the ground. He shot an arrow off in the direction of the guardian, but the shot went wide, bouncing harmlessly off the black surface next to its eye. He began to flap his wings but realized his mistake. The guardian's eye tracked him, pulsing violently as it prepared to fire again. He tried diving again to take his chances on the ground, when suddenly, an energy beam shot from another direction struck the guardian hard and knocked it off balance. What the hell? He finally started gaining altitude again, while the guardian was distracted. His eyes darted about and found the one that had fired on it, too. This one shone with blue lights, rather than red, though as he watched, they flickered, flashing between the two colors. It settled back to blue again and darted to the side, still tracking the other guardian. It fired again and, this time, the red-lit guardian exploded in a blast of fire. The allied guardian turned and scurried off in another direction, though it soon opened fire on one of the flying guardians. What's happening now? He gained altitude, looking around the field below him. It was the same everywhere. Many of the guardians had stopped attacking either the monsters or the Hyruleans, and instead had turned their weapons on each other. They seemed to make no effort to avoid or dodge the oncoming blasts, either, but just kept firing at each other until one or both were destroyed.
Tiba!
A voice from above alerted him just before Hearth swooped down and joined him in the air.
Are you seeing this?
He nodded, frowning. He had a bad feeling about this. There weren't many reasons he could think of that the Sheikah would decide to turn the guardians against each other, and none that he could think of were good for them. Finally, he looked at Hearth.
Take a group of Rito over to that tower and make sure they're okay over there. And tell the others to prepare for the guardians to turn on us fully. Start taking them out while they're distracted. Are you sure? What if? Just do it, Hearth. We don't have a lot of time.
Hearth nodded, turning and streaking off to carry out his orders. Tiba hoped he was wrong, but he was confident that he wasn't. Why else would that Sheikah have them start attacking? Many of the guardians firing on each other were still shining blue. Sidon spun, sweeping the feet out from under one of the large wolfos, and then rammed his trident down into its heart. It released a pained bark that became a death rattle as he wrenched the trident free. A guardian nearby exploded, sending fiery pieces in all direction. He ducked and looked around, spotting another Zora nearby.
Baz, what's happening?
Baz thrust his spear through the neck of a bokoblin and looked back around at him.
I don't know. They just started shooting at each other.
Sidon didn't like the sound of that. It made his scales itch. They'd already had to deal with the guardians occasionally turning on them, though that was usually short-lived. Gaddison had already proven proficient with that Sheikah spear that she had been given. She had stabbed at least 2 of the machines in the eye. Nearby, Naboris fought by sending bolts of lightning out, striking out at the new guardians that had joined the fight. The ones apparently not under their control. Maybe that Sheikah lady was making them start shooting any of others that started acting up? The earth shook with rhythmic footprints, and Sidon whirled, seeing one of the huge Hinoxes approaching and wielding a full tree in its hands. He grinned. Well, time to try that idea I had.
Baz? I need a boost.
Baz looked around at Sidon and then the Hinox. A look of exasperation passed over his face, but he ran forward towards the Hinox. Sidon was right behind him. The Hinox saw them and drew back its tree, preparing to flatten the 2 Zora. Baz spun and crouched, cupping his hands and interlocking his fingers. As Sidon reached him and stepped into his hand, he straightened and threw Sidon into the air, up and over his shoulder. Sidon pirouetted through the air, trident held high over his head. The Hinox watched him with one giant, dumb eye and continued to watch in apparent confusion all the way up until Sidon drove the light-scale trident down, through its eye and deep into its skull. The Hinox fell backwards, Sidon landing with feet planted on its chest. The tree hit the ground with an earth-shaking crash. Grinning, Sidon wrenched the trident free. Sidon, the giant slayer. He liked the sound of that. He turned around just in time to see Baz be struck from behind by a guardian's beam. Dorian's armor clanked softly as he sprinted across the grass, arms spread out behind him. The moblin before him looked around for another foe, the Hylian woman at its feet apparently dead or dying. It turned its head towards Dorian, but before it could see him, he threw down a capsule that exploded with a flash of light and thick smoke. The moblin started, but before it could react, Dorian had already made his way behind it, cutting through its spine with his shining blue sword. It collapsed, and Dorian pushed it to the side, kneeling by the woman. Dead, a bloody wound open on her stomach. Almost in the same place as... No. Now wasn't the time to be caught up in thoughts of his wife. He rose, turning his head to look for another target. The conical helmet he wore felt heavy, but it was surprisingly well balanced for how tall it was. The armor, itself, was lighter than it felt it should be, though it certainly still slowed him down more than he was happy with. But it was strong, able to withstand the weapons of the enemy with apparent ease. He saw Goron stumble and fall to a concentrated attack by a group of Lizalfos and began sprinting in that direction. Something slammed into him from the side and threw him bodily through the air. He landed in a heap, rolling to a stop some 10 feet away, stunned. Something large moved near him, and he looked around to see a guardian with shining red lights, its blue eye turned towards him. Head? It shot him. He reached with one gauntlet hand to his side, where he had been struck. The armor held. It would seem that this armor was able to withstand such attacks, after all. A comfort, he supposed, though he had no idea how many more hits like that it could take. The guardian's eye pulsed again, and Dorian grunted, rolling and pushing himself to his feet. He reached down to his waist pouch and removed a throwing blade, flinging it towards that eye. It struck home, and the guardian lurched, its lights flickering. He quickly looked around, spotting his sword's hilt in the grass a few feet away. The blade had deactivated when he had lost his grip on it. He quickly grabbed it up and turned to face the guardian, steadying his breathing. He was Sheikah. His people, long ago, had made these machines, and they were the best equipped to deal with them. He did not have the intimate knowledge that some of the elders had, however, which could have been a problem. However, Dorian was not just a Sheikah. He swept his hands around in a circular motion, red light and strange symbols trailing behind them. He looked up, focusing on a spot just above the guardian's head. And then he disappeared with a puff of smoke and fire, reappearing just above it. He landed atop the guardian, which looked around in confusion for its target. Dorian reversed his grip on the blue sword and leaned over, plunging it into the blue eye. As the machine began to flash, he leaped off and continued on towards the group of Lizalfos he had seen earlier. The tower swayed. Too much. Either Pure Awe's guardians were losing, or they weren't enough to distract all the other guardians still firing at the tower. She grimaced, still tapping away at the screen.
Paya, get over here.
The girl looked over at her from where she watched the battle raging down below. The tower swayed again, and she yelped, stumbling and nearly falling right over the edge.
I said, get over here.
She obeyed, coming away from the lip of the tower and kneeling beside Pura.
What is it?
Pura pursed her lips, firing off one last command, and then she unhooked the wire from the tower's pedestal.
Time to go.
The tower began to tip. To fall. She could hear the stone below cracking. Shattering. The blue light on the pedestal and the guidance stone suddenly went out, as the connection with the source of ancient energy underneath the ground was lost. Well, at least she had helped all the way up until the last second. She keyed her Sheikah slate to the map and found the nearest shrine, the one just outside of Castletown in the old quarry. They would try there first and see if it was safe. If not, they could go somewhere else. Pura hoped that wasn't necessary. Link hadn't activated nearly enough shrines on his journey all over the country, and if they went anywhere else, they wouldn't be around for the rest of the battle. The blue circle of light appeared around them both, and a moment later, as the tower tipped and fell to the ground with a mighty crash, thousands of blue sparkles rose into the air and disappeared. Oh, no, Mipha thought, watching the battle from Ruda's trunk. The Guardians, the ones that still remained after their mass self-destruction, all turned red with Ganon's malice again. She turned, looking towards the Sheikah Tower, only to watch in horror as it fell to the side, crashing to the ground with a plume of dust and debris. Her eyes darted back towards Castletown, where Link raced, alone, towards Ganon. How many Guardians still remained in the castle? She hoped none. Surely Ganon or Pura would have brought them all out to fight. Please stay safe, Link. Spikes of ice appeared before Ruda and shot out. The ice flew across the battlefield and slammed into one of the Guardians, knocking it to the side and sending one of its blasts wild. She glanced down at the pond surrounding the sacred ground ruins. The water was already getting low. It was a surprisingly deep pond, but it did not have an unlimited supply. When it was gone, so would her ability to fight with Ruda's cryoness. Her eyes swept over the battlefield, instinctively seeking out Sidon's band of Zora. She had seen them only a few minutes ago, but now they had been lost amid the chaos. Bodies lie everywhere. Guardians, monsters, Zora, Gorons, Gerudo. Rudania pounded across the ground, flattening a Guardian beneath one of its feet. It spun, sweeping its tail across a group of monsters and Guardians, sending them flying into the air. Meadow flew low, making use of the cannons on its underside to attack. Naboris bellowed, and lightning shot forth again and again, focusing on the Guardian Skywatchers that had quickly become a problem for the Rito. She hated this. She hated battle. Killing. Death. She was a capable warrior, yes, but only by necessity. She fought to protect life, just like Link always had. He was the best warrior she ever would. No, and he detested taking life. It was one of the reasons she loved him so much. Ruda trumpeted loudly and more shards of ice shot forth, striking and knocking one of the flying Guardians out of the air. But she would fight. She would kill. She hated it, but she would if it meant keeping those that she loved safe. Spirit pushed through the gate with some effort, and Link helped by trying to push the large door open as the horse squeezed through. The door didn't want to budge. The massive iron hinges were in bad shape, rusted and bent. But it moved enough that they were soon through and into the castle courtyard proper. Just like before, everything here was dead. The grass, the trees, the plants, and bushes all grey and lifeless. Though no moon hung in the sky overhead, the air still had that hazy red quality. All around him was quiet. Nothing moved. He saw no Guardians. None of the undead creatures that haunted the dungeons. No monsters. No life. Feeling the growing anticipation, Link mounted Spirit again and kicked the horse into a gallop, taking the path that looped around to the left. The ground rumbled under his feet disconcertingly. Ganon was agitated, and Link thought that he could almost feel its anger in the air, though that may have just been in his mind. As he rode through the castle grounds, climbing higher up the mountainous foundation, memories flashed through his mind. There was the guard chamber that he had done duty at while still a squire. The gatehouse that he and Zelda had passed through dozens of times in and out of the castle. The stables where he had kept Epona. He could remember it all now, and it infuriated him. This had been his home. He had come here as a boy with his father. He had served here as a page and then a squire under Sir Russell, also dead by Ganon's hand. He had been Zelda's personal knight here and captain of her guard. He had spent countless hours and days within these very walls.
"Come on, Spirit,"
he said, gritting his teeth and spurring the horse into a faster sprint. "Almost there now. Almost there." A guardian scaled over the wall in front of them and focused its eye on Link. He cursed and pulled on Spirit's reins, narrowly avoiding the blast. "Come on." He wheeled Spirit and galloped towards the guardian, drawing the master's sword and holding it high. It fired again, and Link used his knees to turn Spirit at just the right time. It didn't get a chance to fire a third time, as Link pulled his feet from the stirrups and leaped off the saddle, slamming the master's sword deep into its eye. He jumped back off the guardian and onto Spirit's saddle, kicking the horse into another gallop as the guardian exploded behind him. Almost there. More guardians. 2 of the stalkers and 1 skywatcher. Too many for Link to fight at once. He cursed and began to turn Spirit, but Zelda's voice suddenly stopped him.
"Keep going, Link. I'll clear a path for you."
She appeared in the path, directly in front of the guardians. Holding her hand out, just like she had done on that day 100 years ago, she sent a wave of golden white light out in an expanding bubble around her. Link rode right past her, turning Spirit around another corner and racing past the now collapsing guardians.
"Thanks. He's going to break free soon, Link. I can feel him building his power now. I'm still trying to hold him back, but I can't much longer." "I know. Come on, Spirit."
Through the second gatehouse. Around another wall and bend in the road. They had ridden high up on the old mountain now, able to look down and see much of Castletown stretched out below. He saw guardians coming. Skywatchers and stalkers. A lot of them. How were there even still that many remaining?
"Zelda." "I know. Keep going."
Spirit galloped like never before, and Link prayed that the horse didn't slip and break a leg on the uneven, broken stone and rubble. This high up, the damage to the castle only grew worse. Guardians fired towards him, too far away to be accurate, but there were enough of them that one of them could have gotten off a lucky shot, anyway. Zelda was there, though, turning the shots away. He heard her grunt, as she did so. This was taking a toll on her. She couldn't keep holding Ganon at bay and protecting him. He and Spirit raced through one final turn and there it was. The central structure of the castle. Twin waterfalls fell down on either side of it, splashing down into pools that would eventually empty out into the moat. Almost there. Link dismounted and ran. As he did, the central spire rose high above him, piercing the heavens. The sky overhead was unnatural, Ganon's influence giving it the permanent appearance of a hazy, red twilight. He couldn't see the sun. Clouds shifted and swirled overhead in a maelstrom, despite a dead stillness to the air. Red lightning forked across the sky.
"Hang on, Zelda, I'm almost there."
He ran. He ran until the cobblestone path transitioned to stone steps. He ran until he passed between the first of several broken winged statues. He ran until he passed under what had once been a magnificent stone arch, topped by more of the winged statues, now nothing more than piles of rubble. He ran until he passed under the vaulted overhang and into the hallway lined by round pillars. Almost. He stopped at opening that led directly into the heart of the castle. Into the sanctum. The doors that had once protected this place, where the king's own throne sat, were long gone. He could see into its shadowy interior, and the horrors that lay within.
"I'm here."
Link took a deep, steadying breath, preparing himself for his destiny. And then he stepped forward, into the Hyrule Castle sanctum. Rivali stared down from his place atop Meadow, his keen Rito eyes piercing the wispy clouds and seeing the castle grounds below. He watched as Link dismounted and approached the castle. He watched as Link paused once, probably to gather his nerves, and then walked inside. Princess Zelda had appeared too, and a wave of golden power spread out from her hand, washing over the approaching guardians. They all collapsed.
"I guess she really had it in her, all along,"
he said, reaching up and rubbing his beak with his feathered fingers. And, he hated to admit it, so did Link. He had gotten that far, at least. And Rivali didn't doubt that he would emerge victorious, in the end. though it did somewhat pain him to admit that, even to himself. He had misjudged the Hylian. Though Rivali supposed that Link had the benefit of a second chance in knowing what to expect. Had he been given such an opportunity? But there really wasn't a point to those thoughts. It was Link, not Rivali, that would claim this ultimate victory. And, really, he had earned it. The little hero had been through a lot. Let him have his prize. At least Rivali would still be remembered as being there. Still fighting to save Hyrule, even from beyond the grave. Yes. He did like the sound of that. Meadow gave a piercing screech and descended, settling down on the grassy field. Its back lifted to a vertical position, beak pointed straight towards the castle. The other divine beasts began to gather around him. First Daruk with Rudania. Then Mipha and Ruda. Finally, Urbosa and her Sloanaboris. And they waited. Now they all waited. For the end. End of chapter.